So hello, everyone. Welcome to Jewish Wisdom for Coping with a Pandemic. We have been meeting for well over 2 years now. And we are on at least our third cycle of Mussar traits. In the last 2 weeks, we've been focusing on the soul trait of silence. And we had so much kind of interesting discussion that there's still a lot of material to cover. So we have decided to roll over silence into a third week. And just for a programming note, I'm going to be on vacation next week for Passover. So we won't meet next week, but we'll meet the following week to begin our next trait, which I cannot remember what it is at the moment. So as is our custom, we are going to begin with a short meditation to help create sacred space, to help give a boundary with the outside world. So please close your eyes and get comfortable in your chair. Take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. Again, a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth, and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching a car pass by on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema. Listen. Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. And Shema, we're listening with an open heart. Shema. Listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, hello, hello, hello. I see we have some new arrivals here. We have Frank and Linda, and we have Stephanie and Joanne. So hello to all of you. As we get ready to dive into our rare third week of silence, let's begin kind of as we did last week. You know, what did you notice about your use of speech or silence this week? Did you notice a difference, kind of spending an extra week on the topic? Did you try any practices? Yes, Nancy.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have missed last week, but this is such an important soul trait for me. And I've been thinking about it a lot and sitting with myself. And I just finished another group reading a book by Bell Hooks, All About Love, if any of you have ever heard of it. But anyhow, one thing I took away with that, you know, we need to really love ourselves, and to love ourselves, to gain strength, to listen to ourselves and what is happening around us has gotten me through this week. And I had to make a difficult decision that I sat with for a while, to divorce myself from an institution that I was involved in. And I wrote an email and told them I was no longer, I thought it was best that I no longer participate. The response was interesting, and it kind of proved to me that it was a good thing that I made this decision to leave. But those are hard decisions at times. And so I felt that the silence that I had, the time that I reflected on it, what I got out of it at the time, and what is right for me, it has now created a sense of peace with me. And I think that's sometimes what silence does.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we're all supporting you as you work with what's best for yourself and these kinds of spiritual practices of being, you're absolutely right. Silence can create a sense of peace, and it can create an opening where we can kind of listen to what our heart really is telling us to do. So wishing you the best of luck on your new path. Okay, before I call on Wendy, I'm just going to let my cat out here. He goes out, he goes in, he'll be back. Okay, Wendy, you're up next.
I think, I don't know if you guys have this experience or not, but when we're practicing and concentrating on a trait, I noticed during the week that things will come in from like maybe something I'm watching on a meeting or reading a book, and it'll be about that trait. So that's what happened with silence. The first thing was the quote, "Silence can be an opinion." And that came out of, and I'm sure a lot of you have read this, A Gentleman in Moscow, which is a historical novel that's pretty relevant to our days right now, what's going on with Russia and things. And in that book, he was talking about the reason that came up was because the Bolsheviks took the poets and wanted to make them write what they wanted to hear. They didn't want the poets to, they silenced them in the way that they said, no, you can't write that, you'll have to write this. And they just couldn't do it. So they just stopped writing poetry, and many of them took their own lives. And this man that in the book said, silence can be an opinion. Saying that that's what the poet's opinion was of the fact that they were going to be told what to write, and they were taking their personal liberties away. The other one was so funny because it was Carlos Watson interviewing Dr. Oz. And I don't know if you guys listen to Carlos Watson or not, but I find that he's interesting. But Dr. Oz said, silence gives others space to tell their own story, which was just amazing. And then I was watching Brene Brown, and she said the exact same thing. So it's like silence is teaching me. I'm like, don't even have to worry about it. It'll teach me. And it's interesting that silence can definitely be opinion.
Thank you, Wendy. Bonnie.
So I'm a problem solver, and everybody doesn't want the problem solved. I've learned they may just want to vent. And so I have a magnet that I found when I was visiting my kids in the Midwest about 6 years ago. There's a picture of a woman and a pizza. And it says the difference between your opinion and the pizza is I asked for pizza. And I love that, but I haven't been very good at using it. So last week, following, like the next day, following this class, I had a friend who texted me about something, and I texted back and said, "Are you asking my opinion?" And she said, yes. And so I gave it to her, and she said, wow, I hadn't thought of it. And in my mind, it was really, I mean, it was just in my mind, it was like how could you think of not doing something? How could you not thinking of not doing what you were doing and just letting it go? And it was really good. And so I have taken that magnet and copied it and put it around my house. It's totally,
it's a good silence mantra for sure.
yes. So,
And that's a wonderful example of, do you want my opinion? It's a very simple question. It's also a very powerful question. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. And if we have Frank or Linda who was wanted to comment.
That's me. So this week I had a scary experience and it turned out okay. But it kind of got me thinking. And so what I did was I wrote a note to an organization that I care a lot about. I told them that I have to kind of step back. And I really appreciated the feedback I got from the two people that I shared this with. And then a couple of times the last 2 days, instead of kind of getting into something, I kind of basically allowed myself and the other person to kind of get back maybe in a couple of weeks. Right. So the idea is to kind of withdraw a little bit. And I think that, I think that's important for me right now.
Thank you, Frank. Silence has so many different aspects, and withdrawing, opening up more space, leaving room for internal silence, or for me, when I have a lack of internal silence, when I'm constantly like churning on stuff, that's a real sign for me when I can actually slow down enough to notice that I'm doing too much. And I've definitely experienced that a couple of times in the last week. I gave a workshop on Sunday about speaking across political difference, where I was trained by this organization, Resetting the Table. And the workshop went great, but boy, it took so much work for me to kind of get ready and prepare for that it took quite a bit out of me. And at the workshop, people were sharing their stories, and one person had shared that they had gotten divorced and ended up leaving their partner. And you're supposed to like try to get deeper meaning out of people and not ask leading or curiosity questions. But one person asked, "Oh, did you regret your decision?" Which was really out of bounds and was really hurtful. And it is, it reminded me of the saying from the Talmud that life and death reside in the tongue. And we have so many, with what we say, we can really, enhance somebody's life, or we could really, really be hurtful. So that was kind of my big encounter with silence this week. Janet, I see your hand is up as well.
Yes. I had an incident which I told you about in an email. I was at the gym, the Jewish Community Center, where a man told a joke to a woman who wasn't Jewish, and it made non-Jewish people the butt of the joke. And it pissed me off, but it happened so fast that I didn't have a chance to say anything. What I did do was write to the woman that he had told the joke to, and let her know how I felt. And she said that she would talk to him herself. Meanwhile, I put something on my Facebook page, and normally I get a lot of responses on my Facebook page. On this one, I only got a couple, but they were from people who weren't Jewish, who had been insulted by people who use jokes with, I'm not going to use the word right now, but there are words, actually, there is a Hebrew word called goyim, which unfortunately has become pejorative. And I try to let people know when I hear them use that word that it really isn't nice. But in this particular case, I put something on my Facebook page without using and talked about my reaction to this joke. and a woman who isn't Jewish, a friend of mine said, you know, people don't realize that attacking the majority this way is also hurtful.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Yeah, it's so countercultural to even suggest that maybe we should try to be a little bit nicer. We should be careful about our language, or kinder. We should be a little bit kinder. And so unfortunately, some combination of the Facebook algorithm and people's sensibilities, there wasn't a big uptick in that. But I think it's really wonderful that you stood up for this person. You reached out to them and you kind of uplifted the issue. And it sounds like it reached one person at least, which is, one by one. Each of us has that opportunity to
Yeah.
reach other people.
I have told a friend who described her daughter-in-law as a word I won't use. And I said, you realize that means abomination?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
idea. No idea.
Thank you, Janet. We have Jane and then Karen.
Well, I definitely thought about this subject a lot during the past 2 weeks, and I missed the first session on this, so maybe you talked about this aspect of it before, but I was thinking about how in music, the rests, the silences are so important. They're just as much a part of the music as the tones and the rhythm and all of that. And also in visual arts, we talk about the negative space, the space between the things that are just as much a part of the design
Mm,
and the composition. So I
absolutely.
was thinking about those parallels in the other arts, or in the arts, yeah.
We didn't talk about that, but that's a great point, Jane. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I once wrote, the difference between music and noise is the rests. Karen.
That plays in perfectly to the hike that I took with my daughter a couple days ago for like an hour short hike. And when we were talking, I realized that we were also both able to hear each other because we sort of talked as we walked. There was a rhythm in the woods. There was flat space just to walk and talk. And then there was a hill where you needed a little more focus. And then there was a waterfall. And so I think that gave us natural breaks for silence to ponder what the other person was saying. And we came out and I said, we really talked more than we usually do. And she's like, yeah, but sometimes you can't figure it all out yourself. Mm. But if you're going to talk to someone and get an answer, you need space to hear them. And so maybe for some people, it's the environment that you're in. Certain environments might allow for a rhythm of talk and listen and respond. And others might be so intense that it's really hard to hold back and hear someone else. And then people are talking together. So what I noticed was that the environment could impact the rhythm of the cycle of talk and listen if you're having a conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting, having rhythm. It's another musical reference and the rhythm, or a certain rhythm of a conversation. And sort of reminding me, sometimes you feel like you're kind of in sync with someone, and sometimes it feels like you're just talking past each other. So it sounds like a number of things combined. So you and your daughter had kind of a nice conversation in what sounds like a really beautiful spot. Any other comments before we dig in a little bit deeper? Okay. Let's just see where we are time-wise. Okay, we're doing pretty well. Okay, so we talked about the spectrum. Let's talk about Lashon Hara. And could someone please unmute and read the first bullet?
Evil talk, Lashon Hara, is so grievous a sin because it kills three people in the one who speaks evil, the one who listens to evil talk, and the one who is being slandered.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, I'm going to stop the share and put that in the chat. Where is Zoom? Here it is. Okay, so evil talk, Lashon Hara. It's also, it's really, Lashon Hara is gossiping. And sometimes it's used to encompass other types of forbidden speech. But Lashon Hara is specifically about gossiping, and it's gossiping about things that are true. And this teaching says it kills three people. So what is that? And it lists them. How does this resonate with you? Yeah, Wendy.
This is of course the first time I've heard this, but this is the first time I've looked at it and thought, who could make this not happen? And there's only two of them that can make it not happen. So I think maybe this is actually telling those two, because the one that it's about can't make it not happen at the time it's happening. I mean, unless they're standing right there, that might be a different sort of thing. But I'm thinking, yes, you can't be the one to listen either. That's kind of, you have to be aware of when it's the time to be silent, and you have to actually make that happen if somebody is starting to tell you something. I think it puts some responsibility on the listener. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, so as the listener, we have a responsibility and almost a complicity when someone starts gossiping. What else? Yes, Linda, and then Joanne.
This is a topic that Frank and I discuss a lot because he's much more ethical than I am. So when I hear something about a friend that I think would be useful to know, I want to tell him. And when he has spent some time with someone and learned something about them, he doesn't want to tell me. So I think you have to discern what's gossip and what's just sharing information. And that's not always so easy.
Great point. Yeah, there's a certain level of discernment there. Someone has a cold, someone has cancer. Do they get permission to share that information? For cancer, certainly want that. If they just have a cold, I don't know, is it gossip? Is it just passing on information? There's a level of discernment that we might make. I'm curious, has anyone ever felt harmed by gossip? Like someone told you something about someone and you're kind of like, God, I really wish I didn't know that. Jane, I see you nodding your head.
Well, the first thing that came to mind, and I'm sure there are other instances too, but the first one was I was taking a walk with a friend, and we had a mutual friend, and she told me something very negative that was going on in our mutual friend's life that I had no idea about. And it was upsetting to hear that, but it was also upsetting that she was telling me this because my friend hadn't told me this. And it made me feel like, well, if she's doing this about our mutual friend. She's probably telling other people things about me that I, may have confided in her. So I didn't want to have anything to do with her anymore. So it damaged our friendship. And yeah, I don't, but I didn't say anything to her about it. So I didn't speak up. But I'm also thinking that sometimes you have to hear a certain amount of it to know that you shouldn't be listening to it. It's not always easy to tell the first time the person opens their mouth and says a few words that this is, wait, don't tell me kind of thing.
Thank you, Jane. Joanne, did you have your hand up earlier? It's like you're still muted.
Okay. Yeah, I do have something, though I didn't at the time, but I have a friend who used to, well, she did a lot of gossiping, and she had something with a person in my school, and was always complaining about her, that she did this thing to her. And I didn't know that other person very well, though I didn't really like her more for political reasons than anything else, this other person. And so another friend of mine said, that woman has never said a bad word about anybody. And I thought about that and I said, oh, shoot, I guess I really shouldn't have been listening to this, tirade that was going on and on and on. And, the person who was doing the gossiping has moved away. So it's not such an issue, but, really was harmful. It affected my opinion of a person that I didn't know. And then someone who does know her said, she's really a good person. And it's like, oh, so yeah.
Yeah, once we hear those things, it really impacts our opinion about someone.
Yeah, and it can be just totally false.
Yeah. Someone once said something about someone else. It was someone leaving the company where I was working, and they said something really vicious about this person. And I knew it was not true. But nonetheless, every time I think of that person, I think of like this really vicious statement. It's sort of gotten glued together. So it's, we are programmed to remember things that we hear, and sometimes to believe things that we hear, even when part of us knows that isn't true. So this is very much we need the Yetzer HaTov to kind of help sort all this stuff out. We can't just let the Yetzer Hara, oh yeah, that's got to be true, and that's got to be true, and oh, tell me more, and oh boy, that's kind of, wow, that's really titillating, or that's very, juicy. So let's see, we have Wendy and then Karen.
I have a couple questions. Can Lashon Hara be something that you read? For instance, we were going to go to it was just like an introduction to somebody who's running for Arizona Senate here. And so I looked on the website and several websites, and there was something very, very damaging on there. And of course, I'm reading it, right? And so could that be something like that? Or I didn't believe it. I'm not going to believe it. I'm just going to do research and things like that. But that kind of puts you in a strange position. You're thinking of a person maybe having done something that they didn't really actually do.
What do people think? Is that Lashon Hara? I don't know, Janet, a resident writer, you're still muted.
Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, unfortunately, many of us enjoy juicy gossip, like it or not.
Don't love
I'm
it.
beginning to think that maybe national figures and movie stars, maybe they're fair game. If you gotta gossip, gossip about those people. Don't gossip about people you know. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I'm just, you know, there are some national figures that we all have opinions about. I just would say be careful about who you say them to.
Okay, and maybe that's important. Maybe that's important because I'm looking into the person, whether or not to vote for the person. And I need to know if this is a true statement, the person's not getting my vote. And it is if it's a truth. So it's kind of weird. Very weird.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, it's always really tough around political figures because there are slanderous things, there are not true things that are said about people. It could fall under the Lashon Hara category, so gets really complicated. And I was at a workshop where it says if you hear something you don't believe about someone you don't like, check another source.
Mhm.
And if you read something you believe about someone you do like, check two sources. Because we have a bias towards taking in information that we already agree with. It's called the confirmation bias. So it's like, oh yeah, that's the way it is. So let's move on to Karen and then Jane. Check our time. Got a couple
I was
more
really
minutes for
thinking,
breakouts.
I was really thinking exactly that, the biases, that you need to check out the source or check multiple sources. But I was also thinking that when we listen to Lashon Hara or we share it, we're actually validating what we're hearing and seeing, and we're enabling the cycle to continue. And I say to my kids, cliches become cliches because they're probably true more than half of the time. And so I was thinking of another cliche saying that I really like, which is that intelligent minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. And every once in a while, that does hit me. And I'm like, you know what? Unless we're really trying to help somebody out or learn something from this conversation about somebody, let's go to an event or an idea. Like, let's not waste our time on stuff that may or may not be true and things that are difficult to validate.
That's an interesting array of choices. And I've thought about another choice as well, because I think it's a good tool to kind of get away from gossiping. But my former rabbi, Janet Martyr, she quoted Rabbi Joseph Telushkin in his book, Words That Hurt, Words That Heal, where he said that gossiping has a big cost because it takes time away from actually getting to know the other person. So maybe talking about events or things like that are a way to get to know someone. Or you could actually, instead of talking about someone who's not there, you could talk about each other or get to know each other in another way. So in a sense, you're talking about people, but you're talking about the people who are actually in the conversation. And that can be, do you have any kids? Do you, what are your hobbies? Et cetera, or it could be, it could get into more kind of deeper ground about other things. So I would say yes and to what you have to say, Karen. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I was also just thinking quickly about when people ask questions, like, what do you do? How many kids do you have? What are your hobbies? It's like we're defining people before we actually get to know how they think about things or why they think the way they do. And I mean, psychology just really interests me. So that's where that comes from. And I also don't really like to define people or pigeonhole them if I don't have to. And I wasn't always like this, it's a long process. So I'm just sharing how I've gotten to where I am.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm terrible at small talk and chit chat, and I kind of find it boring, but but not a lot of people I run into want to talk about Torah analysis. So it's kind of, it's kind of finding that right balance.
If you're quiet, you never know what somebody else is going to say.
Very true. Linda and Frank.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I think, first of all, what was shared just before is that when we gossip, we really are not talking about ourselves and we're not getting to know each other. But it will boomerang, because if we allow ourselves to gossip, it means that it becomes a form of speech. In other words, we encourage it. And therefore, it harms a lot of people. And it reminds me about Mussar. And the idea is that it doesn't matter how strict you are with Sabbath and with kosher and prayer, but if we gossip, it nullifies it. One is in secret, and the observation of the Sabbath of kosher is in public. So what happens is that our personality is seen with our observances, but our essence is very weak, and it furthers that weakness. So there's a cost to the oneself and to the communities that we care about.
That's really powerful, Frank, and that resonates with me. In the book Duties of the Heart, which was written by Bahya ibn Pakuda, it was written around the year 1068 in Spain. It's written in Judeo-Arabic, and he wrote in the introduction, there's lots of rabbis who are very good at halakha and know all there, but they've never once looked in the mirror and never looked at their own personal conduct and never looked at how they treat other people. And he said, and no one has ever written a guide for how we should treat other people and personal conduct, which is, so I looked around, and at first I thought, I'm not worthy to write this guide. And then it was kind of like, well, I'm as good as anybody else to write it, so I'll give it my best shot. But I put it this way, but if it sucks, it's my first effort. So, what can I tell you? So we'll have Wendy and Joanne, and then we'll go start gearing up for the breakout rooms.
I have another question. It's because Passover is almost. So could it be Lashon Hara directed at an entity rather than a person? I'm saying that because as a grant writer, I often have to dig into the problem at hand. I have to find out why these children are not being served the way they're supposed to be served, for instance. And in looking through things, sometimes I talk to other people who know a lot more than I do about the situation. And I don't know if it's Lashon Hara or not, but a particular person in the city of Los Angeles blamed not a person, but the entire LA Unified School District on this particular item being kept from these kids at certain schools. That meant I had to dig and delve. And I met people on both sides, and I just met the one lady who was in charge of the Unified School District. I would say that was exactly the opposite way that she was thinking, and the opposite of way that she was reacting, and what she wanted was the best for the kids, But in writing a grant, sometimes you need to tell it like it is. If something's not being done the way it should be, or the way it's expressed by people, you say, no, they're not actually receiving this. So sometimes it does reflect on a person eventually, but is And I feel like I have to listen to that, at least listen to that, just so that I can write the grant. Sometimes it feels like it's gossip.
Mm.
Well, I don't know how to answer in depth. I'll give a quick answer just because, again, I know people like their time in the breakout rooms. And, I would say that, you're doing your due diligence. Someone says something, from a professional standpoint,
Mm.
you need to look into it, and whether it's moral or ethical. I mean, sometimes we do need to tell damaging truths about people if it's going to, if it's necessary to protect the welfare of others. So yeah, that's what I have to say. So Joanne and Bonnie, we're going to go real speed round. Can you guys keep this to a minute?
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. So I guess you can skip it all. No, yeah, never mind. I forgot already.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Bonnie?
Yeah, I was going to respond to Wendy. As head of a Jewish day school, we called it parking lot gossip, and it's dreadful. And talking with other heads of school, it's very difficult to stop. And it can destroy a teacher, it can destroy a parent, it could destroy the school. And I really worked hard. I was founding head of the school with the wonderful group of parents to explain to them why that's Lashon Hara.
Mm.
So that was my experience.
Mm.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think that's really helpful. All right, so let's take a look at, this is something which came up in passing a few weeks ago. Someone talked, I can't remember who it was. We were talking about like different categories of things going on. And these are 5 different categories of speech. It's from Orchat Tzaddikim, which is the ways of the righteous. Almost certainly a female author because it was written in Yiddish and it's anonymous and they use cooking references. Whereas a man, it's written in the 1500s-ish, fantastic Mussar book. But a man's probably not going to be writing in Yiddish and is probably not going to be using a cooking analogy. So she gave 5 categories of speech. A mitzvah, which is to speak of Torah and the awe of heaven. Speech to be shunned, false testimony, indecent speech and slander. Petty speech containing neither transgression nor benefit, as most of the world's talk, such as speaking of what they had already done and the customs of kings and other such things and affairs of the world, keeping up with the Kardashians, whatever the case might be. Beloved, speech in praise of good deeds and in deprecation of evil deeds. Permissible. Speech of trade for one's livelihood and of clothing, food and drink and one's other needs, but one who minimizes their speech, even in this area, is to be praised. So I'm going to copy these into the chat. Where is the chat? Here's the chat. That is actually background for our breakout question. I won't reshare. I'll just move ahead to the next slide. So it says, with respect to the 5 categories of speech, Rabbi David Jaffe says, so many categories of speech indicates they want us to bring our full attention and power of choice in our use of language. Are the words I'm about to say going to encourage or beat down, give useful information or add verbal clutter, increase connection or create distance? I used to have a question there. Sorry. So the question is, so it's really, what do you think of David Jaffe's classification or his comments about these different characteristics? And then is there one which is kind of hard for you to deal with? All right, I need to just make a couple of changes here. I think somebody ducked out. All right, any questions? Right.
Is your question based on the 5
Right.
types of speech, or is it based on what David Jaffe said?
I think David Jaffe is talking about the 5 categories of speech. So it's a little bit open-ended. Like, do you think he's making a good point about the categories? And then the second one is more, which categories are hard for you? So this is a little bit of a grab bag. It's maybe a little more information than we usually have to digest in a breakout, but that's where we are. Friends, if you are streaming. Yeah, and that last sort of piece under permissible speech, but one who minimizes their speech, even in this area, is to be praised. I mean, there's this and other sources seem to really come down on the side of saying less, which is certainly not how it's been in Jewish spaces where I've grown up. You know, it does not teaching which is embodied by the Jewish community as a whole. So, Karen.
So very quickly, I was asked a question and I answered, and I asked a question and my partner answered. And after that, there was nothing else that I could say that would be useful, because I don't know the situation or the person very well. And the person did not have anything else in particular that person thought to share that was relevant, or maybe that the person felt like sharing at the time. And so I said, okay, let's be silent together. And we were.
Interesting.
And how was that?
For me, I wonder, it's fine for me because I love to be silent with somebody. I think that that's one of my strong suits, but I am curious whether I hear from this person or not, what that experience, if that experience was a good experience for that person, and if maybe that was one of the first times that somebody's ever said, okay, let's be silent together.
They can answer or not, or answer you privately in the chat. That will, or send you an email if they had it. So,
or not. I just,
yeah.
We did exactly what we're talking about. And for me, I'm very comfortable with that, but I don't know if other people are. And I hope there's a positive outcome from it.
You know, there's so many times when I was younger, felt the need that I would get really uncomfortable if it was silent in a conversation. It's like, oh, does this mean the person doesn't like me? Does this mean I'm uninteresting? Do I need to keep them entertained? Do I need to fill the gap? And sort of over the years, and helped a little bit by my younger daughter too, who's really quiet and is not like to talk all that much. Like when she's in a mood to talk, she'll talk a lot, but other times she's perfectly happy to just sit quietly in the car, not even
In this
necessarily on
case,
her phone.
In
And
this case, if we had spoken, it would have been verbal clutter.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's how it might have felt to you, and may or may not have felt that way to the other person. But if there's not a if there's not a need to speak, then not speaking is good. And if the other person decided to speak, they had that opportunity too. Nancy, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just, this is a really tough topic. And we talked about how, for me, gossip is mean. Gossip is an intentional meanness of saying something unpleasant about something and getting back to the person, which can be very hurtful, like we did talk about earlier. And it can also often be misunderstood. And I'm in a triangulation with a friend, with a couple mutual friends. Okay. And I just try to say, it's a perspective. It's how you want to take it, and how, if you want to regain your friendships, repair your friendships with these people, but I don't see them that way. Okay. And so it's really hard for me to hear all the negativity. And to me, gossip is negative. But she's not my friend, she's my friend's friend, and she can't stand me. And she never has, because anybody who's close to my friend, who was her friend, she doesn't want anybody to take time with that person. Okay. So it's very difficult, because all it is just negative and negative. And it's like, I keep saying, I wish she would just be open and get to know me. All she can say is bad things. So to me, gossip is also not giving credit to the situation or the person. And you really, really miss out on getting to know wonderful people when you start gossiping like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a very painful situation where gossip and slander are kind of getting all mixed together. Maybe as a final word, just to kind of blow everyone's mind a little bit more and add another layer of difficulty, sometimes Lashon Hara can be talking about positive things if they induce jealousy. So-and-so's brand new car, so-and-so's Tesla, so-and-so always is wearing lots of makeup and looks gorgeous in any situation, and those sorts of things can, veer into backhanded compliments or genuine compliments that could really, like, I had a situation where my first day of rabbinical school, someone who knew me from the Mussar community came in, and in a room full of 50 people, I'd been at this school 90 minutes, said, "There's Greg Marcus, the Mussar maven." And I felt about his call, because I had just gotten to know, and he's the Mussar expert. And I had just gotten to know these people. I was not there is like wearing a Mussar hat. I was there as a student trying to get to know other students. So somehow I had been,
That's
given this really weird,
Mm.
compliment. So I was pretty upset about that.
Mm.
But anyway, hey, that was almost 3 years ago. So thank you all so much for being here today. As we have the last 2 weeks, we are going to be ending with a silent meditation. So I invite you once again to close your eyes, take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And as we sit together in silence, just allow yourself to feel the presence of those other souls we've been sharing our time with today. When you're ready, you may open your eyes.